I used to think betrayal was loud, a door slamming, a shouted confession, something that split the air like thunder. But it isn't. It's slow, quiet. It seeps in through small cracks, missed calls, dodged glances, or in my case, a red dress. It was supposed to be a normal Thursday night, dinner at her sister Renee's house, like we did every few weeks. I was exhausted from a brutal double shift at the clinic, but I was still looking forward to it. Renee's family was the chaotic kind, teasing, nosy, always talking over each other, but it was familiar. I'd grown to like the rhythm of it. I thought Natalie had too. That afternoon she texted, saying she'd be a bit late. Something about last-minute errands and sorry, I'll explain later. I didn't push. Honestly, I hadn't been pushing for a while. We'd been drifting for months, and I was tired of guessing whether her clipped tone meant what I feared it did. I got there early, helped Renee's husband, Mark, move the picnic table in from the patio to windy outside, chatted in the kitchen with her mum while she made sangria. It felt easy, familiar. I needed that. Then, just as the pasta was being served, 35 minutes after dinner had started, the front door opened. Everyone turned. Natalie walked in like she was arriving at a red carpet event, not her sister's split-level house in the suburbs. She wore the scarlet dress she hadn't touched in nearly 3 years, the one from our weekend in Napa, when things still felt whole. Her heels clicked louder than necessary on the tile. Her hair was done up in soft waves, and her makeup was sharp, dramatic, and she smiled not sheepishly or apologetically, but with that kind of smug half-smirk people wear before they light a match. "Traffic," she said, handing her coat off to Renee, not even glancing at me. "Sorry I'm late." No one spoke. Her mom froze mid. Her dad stared past her, eyes narrowed. And then he stepped into view. The man, younger than me by at least 6 or 7 years, slim-fit blazer, that overconfident posture, and the kind of haircut that said he spent more on hair product than groceries. I'd never seen him before, but I recognized everything about him. Natalie didn't walk toward me. She slid into the seat between Renee and her cousin Alana and nodded casually toward the guy. "This is Marcus," she said, her voice bright, deliberate. "A close friend of mine." I stared. He nodded politely at the room, that kind of tight-lipped nod that people give when they know they aren't welcome. The dinner staggered forward. Too many forced smiles. Forks clinked too loudly. I tried to talk to Mark about the playoffs, but I couldn't hear over the roar in my ears. Natalie was laughing too loud at things no one said, pouring herself wine like it was a wedding reception. She never sat next to me, never looked at me long enough to register. I didn't know if I was having a slow-burning panic attack or if I'd finally woken up. My body wanted to bolt, but I stayed because that's what you do at family dinners. You stay seated, you hold the seams together. And then, as dessert was being brought out, Natalie stood, tapped her spoon against her glass. The sound was sharp, not accidental. The room hushed. "I know this is kind of random," she said with a wide, bright smile. Her hand brushed Marcus's shoulder as she stood. "But I have something I'd like to share." The back of my neck tightened. Renee winced. Her father muttered under his breath, "Oh, Christ." Natalie cleared her throat. "I've been going through a lot lately, and it's been transformative. I've spent so long pretending to be something I'm not, and I just can't anymore. I'm with someone new. I'm in a different place, and I want to be honest about that." Silence. It was the kind of silence that turns a full room into a vacuum. Someone dropped a spoon. Renee turned away, biting her lip. Her mom stared into her lap. I couldn't move. My jaw was slack, but no words came. Then, from across the table, her father squinted. "Wait, Marcus." The man froze. Natalie didn't move. Her dad leaned forward slowly. "Marcus Delaney." Marcus gave a small, reluctant nod. "You're married to Jules," her father said. Time stopped. Jules, Natalie's cousin, her father's niece. The same Jules who had just walked her toddler to the guest room for a nap 20 minutes earlier. The same Jules who had once called Natalie her rock during her rough pregnancy. The red drained from Natalie's face in an instant. Just for a second, her smile slipped. Not sadness, not guilt, something sharper. A flash of panic, or perhaps just irritation that her big reveal had spiraled. Then her voice pitched up, fast, defensive. "It's not what you think," she said quickly. "It's not an affair. It's complicated. We're just close. We're supporting each other. We're just supporting each other through a lot right now," Natalie said, her voice measured but too smooth. Her mother gasped. Someone's fork clattered against a plate. And then finally she looked at me, and that's the part I'll never forget. She didn't look at me with guilt or even shame. She looked at me like I was the cause of all this, like I'd forced her hand. "Mark has been emotionally distant for a long time," she said, calmly, clearly, as if she were reading from a script. "I've carried this marriage on my back for years. I just got tired of pretending everything was fine when it wasn't. I needed someone who actually saw me." I couldn't speak, couldn't move. It was like trying to swim through cement. My mind scrambled to keep up with the words coming out of her mouth. Words I had never heard before, never anticipated. Emotionally distant. Since when? I hadn't been perfect, but I showed up. I cooked. I worked hard. I was present. Maybe not with poetry and roses, but with effort, with loyalty. This wasn't planned. she went on, glancing around the room. It just happened, and I'm not ashamed of it. Renee stood up quickly. Okay, Natalie, she said, her voice tight. That's enough. But Natalie shook her head. Her hands trembled, just slightly, but her voice didn't crack. No, she said. I'm done hiding. Everyone deserves to know. Marcus shifted in his seat, clearly wishing he were anywhere else. Whether he regretted being there or just hadn't expected this public performance, I couldn't say. He didn't defend her, not with words, not with so much as a glance. Natalie had pulled the pin herself and tossed it at the table like it was dessert. Her mother wiped away quiet tears. Her father leaned back, exhaling like someone had knocked the wind from his chest. And I just sat there frozen, like if I held still long enough, the moment would break apart and turn out to be a dream. But it wasn't. The woman I'd built a life with had shown up late to a family dinner, smug, styled, wearing a scarlet dress meant for someone else, and publicly announced she'd traded me in, not just for a new man, but for a man who belonged to our own family. And then, with perfect composure, she blamed me for it. The rest unfolded in fragments. Alana pushed her untouched plate away. Renee started clearing dishes no one had finished. Her father got up wordlessly and walked to the other room, like he couldn't bear to witness whatever happened next. Marcus muttered something about needing air and disappeared out the front door. Natalie looked at me one more time. It was like she expected me to yell, or cry, or storm out. Maybe she needed me to lose control so she could paint herself as the calm one, the wronged woman finally breaking free. But I didn't give her that. I just looked at the empty space on the table where my hand had been moments earlier, that still spot where my ringed fingers had rested, and I saw it clearly for the first time. This wasn't spontaneous. It hadn't just happened. Maybe she hadn't scripted every word. Maybe she hadn't timed it down to the second. But this collapse, this unraveling, it was planned. Carefully, intentionally. It was a message. To them, to me, maybe even to herself. She wasn't hiding anymore. And the person she had become, the one in that red dress, with eyes full of defiance and detachment, wasn't someone I recognized. After that night, if you could even still call it a dinner, I didn't sleep. Not because I missed her, but because I finally understood her. And that was far worse. That night, I lay awake in bed, eyes fixed on the ceiling like it might offer answers. Every detail replayed itself, not like a memory but like evidence. Her entrance, that scarlet dress, the practiced smile, the way her fingers curled casually on Marcus's shoulder like it had always belonged there. The silence when her father realized who he was. The moment Natalie shifted blame onto me like I was the one who owed everyone an apology. But what haunted me more than what happened during the dinner were the things that only started making sense after. The signs had been there, each one too subtle on its own, easy to dismiss. But now, they formed something undeniable, a pattern I could no longer explain away. It started with fitness. Out of nowhere, Natalie became consumed by it. Not just yoga or early morning jogs. She joined 2 boutique gyms, meal prepped with military discipline, spent whole weekends in high-end athleisure stores. She said she was doing it to feel better, that she needed something for herself. I believed her. I even supported it. But the way she came home flushed, lit from within, like someone returning from a secret instead of a workout, started to gnaw at me. Then came the getaways, girls' weekends, self-care retreats, digital detox cabins. At first, they sounded normal. Natalie had always been close with her old friends, college roommates, co-workers, book club regulars. But the trips multiplied. Once a month, then twice. She'd leave Friday morning and return late Sunday night. Her energy brittle, her stories vague. No group photos, no inside jokes, no small souvenirs, just tired. When I asked how it went, she'd smile, say it was fine, relaxing, and change the subject. Then her phone habits shifted. Natalie had never been secretive with her phone. She used to leave it charging in the kitchen at night, forgotten on the couch cushions. Now it never left her side. If she set it down, it was always faced. If I walked in mid-text, the screen would go dark like a curtain being drawn. She said she was making appointments, checking group chats. But once, I saw her swipe away a message before even finishing it. Delete, tap, gone. I told myself not to jump to conclusions, that I was projecting, that it was normal in the digital age to be glued to your screen, to want privacy, that maybe I was the one overthinking things. But that dinner proved otherwise. All the vague answers, all the late arrivals, all the locked screens and glowing skin and weekends that never added up. They weren't chapters of coincidence. They were a prologue, a slow, quiet unraveling. And the worst part, she had written the story long before I even realized I was a character in it. But deep down, I knew something had already fractured. There were new earrings in her jewelry box, tiny gold hoops I didn't recognize, still resting in the velvet like they'd barely been touched. A charm bracelet too, delicate and engraved, breathed in cursive. I asked where they came from. Natalie laughed, said it was some flash sale online, one of those midnight impulse buys. She teased. I nodded, pretended to believe her, but the box didn't look like it had ever been mailed. Then there was the night she came home late, said she'd grabbed dinner with a friend from work, her voice breezy, her story just specific enough. But when she turned her head, I saw a smudge faint, just below her jaw. Lipstick, or maybe gloss. I pointed it out. Oh, probably from trying shades at Sephora. She replied casually, like it meant nothing. And maybe it would have, except her coat carried a cologne I didn't wear. A center shop. Too confident. I checked the restaurant she'd mentioned after she fell asleep. It had closed 2 months earlier. From then on, I started watching closely, not accusing, just observing. Sometimes I'd ask simple questions. Where you headed? Always an answer. Always easy target. Pilates coffee with Alana once. I called Alana myself under the guise of checking in about someone's birthday dinner. She said she hadn't seen Natalie in weeks. My mouth went dry, but I kept it to myself, quietly collecting each new inconsistency like puzzle pieces. I told myself I'd wait until I had the full picture, but I think I already knew. Then came the night of my cousin's engagement party. Natalie said she had a headache, needed rest, told me to go without her. You'll have more fun without me hovering anyway, she said with a half smile that didn't reach her eyes. I offered to stay, pick up takeout, watch something light. She waved me off. When I came back a few hours later, she was in bed, lights off. Sorry I missed it, she murmured, her back to me. I kissed her shoulder, but she didn't stir. The next morning, I noticed the wine bottle on the counter, 2 glasses in the sink, each with different lipstick marks. One the color she usually wore, one not. I stared at them for a long time. Then I washed them quietly, like scrubbing them away might fix something deeper. I didn't ask. I think part of me didn't want to know, or maybe I already did. Even our intimacy had gone silent. Natalie no longer reached for my hand during movies. No kiss goodbye before work. No warmth in the small gestures that used to feel automatic. When I brought it up gently, she said, I just haven't felt like myself lately. I wanted to believe her, but I felt like a ghost in my own life, present, visible, but untouched, unnoticed. She started sleeping on the far edge of the bed, her back turned, like the space between us was intentional. There were moments where I almost asked her directly, like when I saw her outside, pacing the driveway in a hushed call, or when she came home breathless, her purse clutched tight to her chest like a shield. And I asked if she was okay. Why are you always checking on me? She snapped. Can I just breathe? It wasn't the words that hit me, it was the tone. Like my care was invasive, like my presence was something she needed to escape. I didn't realize it at the time, but she was already writing the narrative, rehearsing the lines she'd delivered to Renee's dinner table weeks later. The Marcus Distance story, the he doesn't see me performance. She was laying the foundation, making sure it would sound believable when the time came. And for a while I let myself believe maybe it was my fault, that maybe I'd done something to make her vanish while standing right in front of me. Maybe I hadn't asked the right questions. Maybe I stopped noticing the little things, handwritten notes, midday texts, brushing her hand when passing in the hallway. But the more I combed through those memories, the more I saw myself clearly. I had been there. I was present. It was Natalie who slowly began stepping back, like she was rehearsing a version of our story where I was already gone. After the dinner at Renee's, I did something I'd never done before. I checked her laptop. It was open on the kitchen island, humming quietly under the light. Her email was minimized. I clicked. I didn't need to scroll far. Just the subject lines were enough. 7 p.m. confirmed. Be careful tonight. Can't wait to see you again. No names, nothing explicit. But intent doesn't need a name to burn. That's when I realized she'd built a second life, a quiet, parallel world where I didn't exist. A version of her that had been slipping through the cracks of our marriage, piece by piece. I started wondering when it started. Was it a passing conversation with Marcus at a birthday? A text exchanged under the guise of family logistics? Did she fall slowly, inch by inch? One rationalized moment at a time, or did she just wake up one day and decide she was done with me? What I couldn't get past was that it wasn't just anyone. It was Marcus, married to Alana, a dad, the kind of guy who stayed late to help clean up after Thanksgiving dinner. Polite, invisible. The kind of man no one would suspect, and maybe that was the point. How long had they been circling each other in plain sight? At holiday parties, had she caught his eye across the room while I was pouring drinks for her uncle? Had he watched her laugh at something I said, and tucked the sound away like a keepsake? Or worse, had they disappeared for a few minutes while no one noticed? That night after dinner, I couldn't drive home. I sat in the car outside Renee's house for almost half an hour, parked beneath the flickering porch light, watching shadows settle into the windows. The house had gone quiet, but inside me, something loud was collapsing. I realized the betrayal hadn't started at the table. The betrayal had been unfolding for months, disguised as her distracted kisses, her cold shoulders, her silence, that red dress, the way she rested her hand on his shoulder, the hollow toast that wasn't the beginning, that was the finale. And I had watched it like it was theater. There's a strange kind of calm that comes when you stop lying to yourself. The fog doesn't lift all at once. It evaporates in fragments. One night I noticed she'd stopped wearing her ring to bed. Another, I realized she hadn't asked about my day in weeks. Her just tired became every night. Her smile never quite reached her eyes. And yet, I made excuses. I told myself people drift, that marriages stretch and bend, that maybe Marcus was a stupid mistake, a phase, something she'd regret. But the truth doesn't bend. It waited until one Thursday afternoon to break me clean. I was coming home from a 3-day work trip, just a short flight. I hadn't told Natalie I'd moved my flight. I was supposed to land Friday night, but I shifted to an earlier one without saying a word, some foolish, aching impulse to surprise her. I even stopped at a bakery near the terminal and picked up the pastries she used to love. Lemon poppy seed, the kind she used to steal bites from even when she said she wasn't hungry. Maybe I thought it could still be salvaged, that a small gesture, one done without warning or performance, might loosen whatever knot had been slowly hardening between us. It was just after 2 p.m. when I pulled into the driveway. Her car was already there. That didn't track. She had told me explicitly, flatly, that she'd be working late that day. A team dinner, back after 9. No room for misinterpretation. I stared at the vehicle for a long moment, the windshield reflecting the soft June light, and felt something shift in my stomach. Not a scream, just a small, sharp quiet. I told myself she must have left early. Maybe a cancelled meeting, maybe a migraine. I told myself not to invent shadows where there weren't any. But the front door was unlocked. Inside, the house held its breath. The kitchen light was on. One wine glass in the sink, another on the counter, a smear of lipstick on the rim, a color she didn't usually wear. Deeper, bolder. I set the pastry box down, but my hands wouldn't let go of it. My feet moved anyway, past the living room, past the hallway, toward the stairs. That's when I heard them. One was hers, familiar, flat, the other male, quiet, a low hum behind the door of our bedroom. I couldn't tell you what was being said. I don't think my brain let me hear it. I climbed the stairs like they were underwater. Each step was a decision, each breath a betrayal of calm. The door was open just a crack. Light spilled through it in a soft slice across the hallway floor. And then I saw it. A man's jacket draped across the back of the chair. Her charm bracelet, the one I gave her 3 anniversaries ago, lying on the nightstand, tangled beside 2 empty glasses. Her scarf, her heels. Her laughter cut short the moment I pushed the door open. Natalie sat on the edge of the bed, her damp hair curling at the ends like she had just stepped out of the shower, her robe barely tied. Marcus sat beside her, too close, hands still resting lightly against her thigh, like he belonged there. They both froze. The look on her face wasn't fear. It wasn't even shame. It was surprise, like I was early for a dinner she hadn't set the table for yet. "Mark," she said, standing quickly. "I didn't know. What are you doing here?" "I came home early," I said. My voice was flat, detached, as if it belonged to someone watching from outside themselves. Marcus stood too, fumbling with his shirt. His mouth opened like he might explain something, but nothing came out. He looked small in our room. "Wrong. This isn't what it looks like," Natalie said. The words fell between us like someone else had written them, like she was auditioning for disbelief. "He just stopped by to check on me. I wasn't feeling well. Not in the way a body aches, but in that strange, suspended way when the air around you changes and you're the only one who notices." I stood still in the bedroom, the one we painted together in late spring, where the photos still hung crooked on the walls from when we tried to make it feel lived in. Her sweater was crumpled on the floor beside her bag, the same knit one she always stole from me during cold mornings. It looked almost carefully placed now, as if it were part of a stage set. A charm bracelet she never wore was curled on the nightstand, beside a half-eaten box of chocolates. I didn't need to open it, but I did. Tucked beneath the lid, a note, written in a hand that wasn't mine. 2 weeks ago today, it still can't stop thinking about you. I turned, held it up. Natalie didn't say anything. She just stood there, robe loosely tied at the waist, like she had no idea whether she was supposed to feel shame or simply annoyance that I was in the scene too early. Marcus, still buttoning his shirt, hovered near the dresser, eyes darting anywhere but me. "I didn't know," he started, but his voice fell away before it became a sentence. "I'm sorry," he added, almost as punctuation, and left. I let him. Natalie stepped toward me, but I raised a hand flat, instinctive. "Don't," I said. "Mark, don't lie to me anymore." Her face flickered, some mix of defiance and fatigue. I wasn't lying, and I laughed, or something like it. It came out thin and sharp, like air forced through a crack. "You weren't lying," I echoed. "So I just happened to walk in on the man you introduced to my family in our bed with chocolates and a love note." She lowered herself onto the bed, shoulders folding in. "I didn't mean for you to find out like this." "You didn't mean for me to find out at all," I said. She didn't reply. I left the room. I went downstairs looking for air, or clarity, or maybe just distance. But the kitchen, too, betrayed me. A receipt was lying face up on the counter. A hotel, room 204. Dinner for 2. Champagne. Dated 3 nights ago. The same night she'd told me she was staying over at Alana's after a wine night. "You've been lying for months," I said, not looking at her. "All the friend dinners, the gym sessions, the weekends away. You brought him here." "Natalie," her voice dropped an octave, measured. "Practiced. If you hadn't come home early, you wouldn't have known." That hit harder than the note, harder than the hotel. Not the affair, not even the lies, but the cold calculation of that sentence. "So that's it?" I asked. "You're not sorry. You're just annoyed the curtain fell before you were ready." She crossed her arms, defensive now, as if I had stepped out of bounds in my own home. What do you want me to say? That I've been unhappy? That I stopped feeling seen a long time ago? That I found something else, something you stopped giving me? I shook my head. Slow. No. I want you to admit this wasn't a cry for help. It wasn't about how bad things were. It was a choice. 1,000 tiny choices you made long before today. She didn't deny it. Not the hotel. Not the late nights. Not the man with her name on his lips and his dog on her lock screen. And the silence after that said more than any half-truth could. I left no destination. No music, just highway and static and the sound of my own breathing, finally audible again after months of being buried beneath her carefully curated chaos. When I returned, the bedroom was half empty. Natalie stood near the closet, folding sweaters she hadn't worn in months. Her robe was gone, replaced by jeans and the neutral armor of someone trying not to cry in front of the person they used to love. Where are you going? I asked. To my sister's, she replied. I figured you'd want space. You figured right. She paused in the doorway, suitcase behind her like punctuation. This wasn't supposed to happen like this, she said, voice low. But it did, I replied. And it wasn't an accident. She didn't offer a goodbye, just turned. And for the first time in months, I didn't follow. The next morning, I found what she hadn't taken. A second phone tucked beneath a pack of old razor blades under the sink, locked, but the wallpaper was a giveaway Marcus's dog. The same one I'd seen months ago in the background of a post from his sister. I didn't need the password. I already knew. The phone wasn't hiding secrets. It was confirming them. That night, I changed the locks. When her message came hours later, I'll be back for a few more things. We need to talk. I'm still figuring things out. I didn't reply because I wasn't. The betrayal wasn't a cliffhanger anymore. It was a period, a full stop. Whatever came next wouldn't have her in it. For a while, I thought that was the bottom, that the hollow click of the door behind her was the deepest part. But I was wrong. Grief has layers, and some of them look like your son standing too still. Jake was 15, quiet in a way that made adults underestimate him, sharp in the way that made it dangerous to do so. He'd been watching this story long before I gave it a name. The day after she left, I tried to pretend. Pancakes, school talk, his lunch packed like old times. But he knew, in the way he didn't meet my eyes, in the way he said thanks like it was borrowed from another boy's voice. That night, I heard a knock on my door. Gentle, timed. He stepped in with something in his hands. The photo, framed from our last trip to Colorado, the three of us, smiling in front of a waterfall, the kind of smile that fools you until hindsight strips it down to its bones. He set it on the table in front of me, but slid a yellow sticky note beneath the glass. Then he said, "You don't have to explain. I already know." I looked down at the note. In his handwriting, one sentence. That was then. Now you're outside. He wasn't speaking to me. He had written it for her. I didn't ask how he found out. Maybe it was the muffled phone calls, the tension like a second atmosphere, the unanswered promises, or maybe he saw the lipstick before I did. But Jake wasn't confused, wasn't broken. He was clear. She doesn't live here anymore, he said, almost gently. And then, I finally found my voice. Jake, I tried. I'm not in the middle, he said. You didn't put me there. She did. The next day, Natalie texted that she'd be by to collect the last of her things. Quick, no drama. I didn't respond. When she arrived, Jake was in the living room, silent, unreadable. She walked in like she'd done it 100 times, soft against the wood floor, as if the echo of her leaving hadn't reached her yet. She saw him and smiled too brightly. "Hey buddy," she said. "How's school?" He didn't answer. Natalie stood near the doorway, hands clasped too tightly, like she was trying to hold herself together by force of habit. "I've been meaning to talk to you," she said, her voice light, artificial. "I know things feel tense, but I want you to know, no matter what, I love you, okay?" Jake didn't look up from the table, just stared at the wood grain like he was trying to disappear into it. "Then why'd you burn down the house we were still living in?" The question cracked across the room, quiet but total. Her breath caught. "I didn't mean to," she said quickly. "It wasn't supposed to happen this way." Jake finally met her eyes. His face was unreadable, but his gaze, sharp, brutal in its clarity. "But it did," he said. "And you picked it, over and over." "I didn't choose to hurt you," she said, her voice faltering. "That was never a—" "Yes, you did." He cut her off. He cut her off. Still calm. "Because you could have stopped, you just didn't want to. I stayed in the hallway. I heard you." The silence that followed was the kind that hums, charged and terrible. I felt it in my chest. Not just the truth of it, but the weight no kid should have to carry. The script no 15-year-old should have to deliver. Jake stood and walked to the shelf, picked up the photo frame again, the one from the Colorado trip, where we looked happy because we didn't know better yet. Without a word, he placed it in her hands. "So you remember what you traded in?" Natalie stood frozen, the frame trembling in her hands. Her fingernail tapped once against the glass, an accidental sound that felt like punctuation, a final period at the end of something breaking. Then she spoke, voice colder now, turning to me as I stepped into view. "You've poisoned him against me." "No," I said. "You did that all by yourself." She turned back to Jake, her tone flipping to something desperate and maternal too late. "Please don't do this," she said. "I'm still your mom." "You were," he said. Now you're just the voice I hear when someone's lying. She staggered, as if the words had real weight. Her expression slipped, composure cracking in places she couldn't hide anymore. Not sorrow, not guilt, panic. Mark, she snapped, eyes wide. Do something. He can't talk to me like this. But I didn't move. Not to her. Not this time. She looked between the two of us, searching for leverage in a house that no longer offered her any. Jake turned and walked away without another glance. Natalie stood there alone, holding the frame like it was oxygen. Then slowly she set it back down on the table and picked up her bag, the same one she'd packed days ago, its strap frayed, its weight all hers. At the door, she paused. Her voice sharpened again. He's going to regret this. No, I said. You will. She didn't argue, didn't cry. She just left. The door clicked shut behind her, and that was it. The quiet afterward felt like the hush after a storm leaves, not peace exactly, but stillness, a clearing, the kind of silence that used to be suffocating, but now felt like fresh air. The echo chamber was gone. The questions weren't bouncing anymore. The gaslight had been snuffed out. The spell had lifted. Jake stayed in his room that night. I checked in once. He nodded when I asked if he needed anything. That was enough. The silence between us wasn't jagged anymore. It was shared. The next morning I found him in the kitchen, toasting bread. Like nothing cracked had shattered him. She's going to come back, he said, eyes still on the toaster. I didn't ask how he knew. He always knew. Maybe, I said, but we're not letting her back in. Jake didn't argue. He just nodded once and handed me the last slice of toast, burnt at the edges, still warm. We sat there together, father and son, in a kitchen that still smelled faintly of smoke and cinnamon, sharing silence like it was breakfast. No tears, no false comfort. Just two people sifting through the debris someone else left behind. Somehow, that felt like the beginning of healing. Not the loud kind. The kind that comes slowly, like light through blinds you forgot to open. I used to believe the worst part of betrayal was the discovery. I know better now. The real ache comes after, when the person who broke everything starts clawing for the shards. Not out of remorse, not to rebuild, but because letting go means admitting they've lost control. And that, for people like Natalie, is the true horror. 2 weeks after she left, I filed for divorce. Full custody. No drama, no grand gestures, just quiet certainty. I couldn't trust her, not with Jake, not with the fragments of our home, not with anything sacred. The morning after the filing, my attorney called. Her voice was measured, but the weight beneath it was unmistakable. You'll want to brace yourself. Natalie's legal response had arrived, and it didn't pull punches. Swinging would have been generous. She accused me of emotional neglect, of psychological manipulation, said I'd turned our son into a weapon and isolated her from everyone who could have saved her. To claim Trevor happened because I abandoned her emotionally. Recast herself as a woman suffocating under years of quiet tyranny. Reading it felt like stepping into a mirror that lied, every angle warped, every reflection unfamiliar. A fairy tale rewritten in reverse, where the villain wore my face and the damage was all hers to inherit. I stared at the pages in my lawyer's office. My hands trembled, but I said nothing for a long time. She's staging this, I finally said, turning it into a performance. My attorney nodded, jaw set. We see this a lot. When someone's caught, they pivot, throw everything they can and see what sticks. Can she win? I asked. She didn't answer right away. With no context, she said, yes, but you've got documentation, witnesses, messages, and Jake. Still, it shook something in me. This wasn't a failed marriage anymore. It was a war, and Natalie was playing it in the language she knew best. Projection, theater, illusion. The next hit landed just days later. Jake called while I was at work. His voice was clipped and low, like someone trying not to panic. Dad, she was outside the school. I stopped breathing. What do you mean? She was parked across the street, didn't get out, just sat there. Jake saw her first. She was leaning against the hood of her car, arms folded like punctuation, waiting just beyond the school gate, where rules start to blur and stories can be shaped however you like. She waved him over. Not a smile, just that half-familiar tilt of the head, the one she used when she wanted to seem harmless. He didn't go to her. When he tried to walk past, she reached out, fingers closing around his arm like habit, not apology. By the time the school security guard stepped in, I was already driving Jake safe, but shaken. She hadn't told anyone. No notice, no permission. Just the kind of entitlement that assumes motherhood is still a trump card, even when trust is ashen glass. What she didn't know, what none of them ever seemed to calculate, is that the cameras don't care about performance. They caught it all. Her by the car, her stepping in his path, her voice, sharp and unmothered, echoing across the lot. Don't walk away from me. I'm your mother. We had the footage. I brought it to my attorney in a plain manila envelope that felt heavier than it should. This changes things, she said, after watching it in silence. This isn't custody anymore. This is leverage. But Natalie wasn't finished. She started writing online, vague posts draped in metaphor, pain dressed as poetry, survivorship as spotlight, stories of betrayal and being broken by the people you trust most. She never used my name, but she didn't need to. Friends started texting. "Are you okay? Is what she's saying true?" Some believed her. Others said nothing. At first I said nothing to no rebuttals, no defense. I thought silence would preserve my dignity. I thought truth would eventually speak for itself. Then the school called. Jake's counselor, quiet and careful, said, "We had a teacher raise concerns. Natalie filed a formal report." I blinked. "She did what?" "She claimed you're mentally unstable, that you're isolating Jake from her." She asked for an emergency review with administration. It landed like a blow, not because I didn't see it coming, but because she said it out loud. She wasn't just rewriting history now. She was staging a coup, not to regain Jake, but to bury me beneath the rubble she created. That's when it clicked. She wasn't trying to win. She was trying to undo me story by story, lie by lie, not to reclaim love or closeness, but to punish me for stepping outside the narrative she thought she still controlled. What she hadn't accounted for were two simple truths. First, I had proof. Second, I was done staying quiet. I began organizing everything. Messages, her own words, typed at midnight, careless. Photos, her and Marcus's arms wrapped like confession, taken at family events where I'd been standing just off frame. Screenshots of hotel confirmations, timestamps that told their own story. And most importantly, the video. The moment she crossed a line in public, on record. Jake also wrote a statement. I didn't ask him to. Jake just stepped into my office one evening, the paper in his hand already creased from being held too long. "I think the court should know how I feel," he said. No dramatics, no tears. Just that rare, steady kind of pain that doesn't need volume to be devastating. His words were He wrote about the nights she disappeared like smoke, no goodbyes, no explanations. The phone calls she thought he couldn't hear, the cologne that didn't belong to either of us, the way her eyes skimmed past him like a stranger in her way. He wrote about how her love had conditions. The final paragraph broke something in me I didn't know was still breakable. I used to wait at the window for her car to pull in. I don't do that anymore. Waiting for someone who doesn't come home just teaches you how to stop hoping. I don't want to feel that way again. I gave the letter to our attorney. She read it once, then again, slower. "We're adding this," she said. "This changes the shape of things." When the court date arrived, I didn't walk in as the man who'd been betrayed. I walked in as a father, one who'd been paying attention. Natalie came in late, navy blazer, tissue in hand like it had been chosen as part of the outfit. Her lawyer whispered theatrics between glances. She dabbed at her eyes. The performance had begun before her seat had cooled. When it was her turn to speak, she did what she always did, rewrote the story with herself at the center. She cried, said she'd made mistakes but was being punished for needing connection, claimed she only wanted to rebuild what she'd broken, that I had poisoned Jake against her, that I was unstable, vengeful, unwell. But here's the thing about truth. It doesn't raise its voice. It doesn't have to. We presented the footage, her reaching for Jake outside the school gate, his body pulling away like instinct. We showed messages, her late-night rendezvous with Marcus, neatly coordinated under the guise of girls' nights. We read Jake's words aloud, all of them, when the judge asked him, privately and directly, if he felt safe with both parents. Jake didn't hesitate. He met the judge's eyes and said, "With my dad, only my dad." Natalie tried to speak. She raised her voice, accused us of coaching him, of planting fear, but the room didn't bend for her this time. The ruling came down like something inevitable. Full custody, supervised visits, pending evaluation, parenting course, psychological review. The system had stopped listening to her tears and started listening to her track record. She didn't speak to me afterward, just brushed past in the hallway, eyes hard, mouth tighter than the knot in my chest. But as we passed, she leaned in close like it was still a game. "It's still a scene," and whispered, "You'll regret this." I met her eyes.com/whole. "No, you will. One day, when the silence you built starts echoing louder than the lies you told." She didn't respond, but for the first time, she didn't have a line ready.